by then it is too late. This means that the National Command Authority waited for 75 minutes before scrambling aircraft, even though it was known that 4 simultaneous hijackings had occurred, an event that has never happened in history. Sources: CNN, ABC, MSNBC, the Los Angeles Times, and the New York Times. And if you go to my website, you will see the beginning of a fabulous series of articles out of Canada by 2 writers, Ilarion Bykov and Jared Israel. Their website is The Emperor's New Clothes. You can find all the links from my website, all these other sites. They've established clearly, using documents that have now been taken down off of U.S. Air Force websites, that it is a matter of routine policy on the FAA and the U.S. Air Force to scramble a jet the instant any airliner is hijacked without waiting for an order from the president.
What does that mean, scramble? I don't know. Sorry.
You put them up in the air and make them go intercept the jet, not shoot it down, but you put a fighter aircraft in the airspace with the hijacked airliner. It's FAA routine procedure. It doesn't require an order from the President of the United States. Remember Payne Stewart? Remember his airplane? Remember it went off course? It was off course for no more than 10 minutes, and fighter jets had been scrambled to fly along beside it. Now, if we have 4 simultaneous hijackings, why were no planes scrambled to intercept those planes for 75 minutes? The Andrews Air Force Base website has taken down information saying that it maintained a ready response scramble force to protect the skies over Washington, D.C. Presidential order is not necessary to intercept an aircraft. It is necessary to shoot down an aircraft. And yet the government has committed a lot of lies. Dick Cheney has lied about U.S. Air Force response. I used to work outside Andrews Air Force Base. I saw F-16s, F-18s, F-15s taken off all the time.
So they took down that site?
They have changed the site. It has been archived and saved. If you go to my website, go to the articles, you can get links to the way it used to read. Okay? All right. September 13th. China is admitted to the World Trade Organization after 15 years of unsuccessful attempts. The vote was taken, it was just ratified about a week ago, but that was the vote. Nobody noticed. September 15th, the New York Times reports that Micheal III, the head of A.B. Brown in the United States, resigned effective immediately without explanation. The insider trading, September 15th was the first day that the stock market opened after the attacks. September 29th, the San Francisco Chronicle reports that 2.5 million in put options on American Airlines and UAL are unclaimed. This is the result of the suspension in trading. Nobody showed up to claim it. October 10th, the Pakistani newspaper Frontier Post reports that Ambassador Wendy Chamberlain has called on the Pakistani oil minister. The pipeline is now a go. Mid-October 2001, the Dow Jones is back up near 10,000 as a result of the massive looting. Outpouring of cash. Gonna love this one. One of my dearest causes in the whole world, I have a couple of monthly columns in magazines, one of which is High Times, believe it or not. And, it's a strange thing for an ex-narc who hasn't had a beer or a joint. I've had no mind-altering chemicals in 18 years. It'll be 19 in January. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I work a lot with men in recovery. I've written more than 30 articles on the subject of drug addiction and recovery for the U.S. Journal of Drug and Alcohol Dependence, and I can tell you that drug addiction is a medical, social, and spiritual problem. It is not a criminal problem. And one of the most frightening things that I saw in the wake, and we're going to wind this up here, and I'm going to hit you with everything that I got. One of the most frightening things that I saw in the wake of the attacks was a story that showed right here. This is from the New York Post. That the 2 companies, most of you know that some 30 to 40% of the prison inmates in this company are housed by private corporations who trade their stock on Wall Street based upon the number of human beings that they're housing in prison. That's what our economy has evolved into. We are a search and destroy economy. A snake eating its own tail is not nutritious, yet that's what we're doing. And I saw that the stocks of these two companies, Corrections Corporation of America and Wackenhut, went up 300% in the, 2 weeks after the attacks. And not only that, you read this story, and there was an urgent request outside of the budget for 40,000 new prison beds. That's before the next year's budget. Now, does anybody here think there are 40,000 Islamic terrorists in this country? Who are those beds for? I'll tell you when I get there, you know? Okay? But the Bureau of Prisons budget request next year is supposed to ask for something, and this is not confirmed, but I've heard on the order of 400,000 new prison beds. Maybe more. What I just showed you was in one of the issues of the newsletter on the site, yes. Now, in January of this year, when the Bush administration took office, these are the folks that brought us savings and loan with Lockheed Martin, DynCorp, looting $2 trillion out of the Department of Defense, $59 billion out of HUD. That's to sustain this bubble, to maintain the grip on power of this CFR trilateral group that has taken us into a war for Central Asian oil before the age of oil ends. And in January I said, they're going to go after Social Security. You mark my words. The savings and loan was just a warm-up. And here I find this story, or this letter, written to the Honorable Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who is the head of the President's Commission to strengthen, Newspeak, Orwell, strengthen Social Security. And the letter is from two members of Congress. It's from Henry Waxman, I don't have the second page, and one of the members of Congress. And you know what they're saying? You've locked us out of your meetings. You're having closed-door, classified meetings on Social Security. We're the members of the Ways and Means Committee that are charged with Social Security oversight, and you have locked us out of the meetings. Does that scare you? It scares me. They've just been writing letters so far. Hey, listen, I'm going to come to this, but, there's a few bright lights on the hill. They aren't fully bright yet, but there are some people speaking out. And in the wake of the total assault on American civil liberties, Patrick Leahy, forgive me, had the temerity to write 6 letters to Attorney General John Ashcroft demanding that he testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee on such matters as military tribunals and Ashcroft's unilateral decision to begin wiretapping attorney-client conversations in terrorist cases. And he said, I demand that you respond to me in writing. I think it was by the 13th. Well, he got a response in writing, but it was an anthrax letter. You notice they're only going to Democrats? All right, now let's look at this. H.R. 3162, the Patriot Act. Hey, let's hear it for the Patriot Act. Now it's group therapy. That's good. Okay. In the most recent issue of From the Wilderness, we covered some of the highlights or the lowlights of this bill. And I want you to listen to me very closely. This is your Constitution. We're coming now to pay the bill for the price that you, and remember how I defined you at the beginning of this presentation as all of the American people who failed to reconcile accounts after the assassination of John Kennedy, of Bobby Kennedy, of Martin Luther King, of Iran-Contra, of Vietnam, of Panama, of savings and loan, of the genocide of 2 million people in Rwanda, of the rendering to radioactive waste of large portions of Iraq with depleted uranium that's contaminated with plutonium, the displacement of 1 million people in Colombia within the last year, the bills are coming due, and now it's your turn to pay. The Patriot Act that was passed just recently includes several provisions. First of all, the FBI can enter your home in a criminal investigation. I think it's criminal. They might have said terrorist. It doesn't make any difference how you define it. When you're not there, without a search warrant. They may seize whatever they want to seize and use it to convict you in a court of law for a crime when you didn't even know they came. Now, how many people know that the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution is supposed to protect us against unreasonable searches and seizures? The Patriot Act also permits the CIA to share its intelligence files with local law enforcement. Now, what does that mean? Everybody knows the agency's been wiretapping people illegally for a long time. So is the FBI, COINTELPRO. I mean, but the deal is that that information, because it wasn't obtained under a warrant, could never be introduced into court as evidence. Now, when the CIA turns all that information over to the Los Angeles Police Department or the Chicago Police Department, they can write that up as a probable cause statement, go out and find one other piece of evidence, and put it all into court. Gee, the Fourth Amendment is gone. The exclusionary rule is gone. The Act also provides that local police agencies can share their intelligence with the CIA, who may in turn share it with foreign intelligence agencies. We have the beginnings of the global secret police. Echelon is a program of wiretapping run by the United States, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And it was originally set up on the premise, gee, it's illegal for CIA to wiretap Americans, but there's nothing wrong with the Canadians doing it. And Americans will wiretap the British, and the Australians will wiretap, and then we all share it. That's Echelon. And now all that information now under the Patriot Act can now be used in terrorist criminal prosecutions. And it's going to get worse for you in just a minute here, if it isn't bad enough already. Okay. In addition, the Patriot Act allows cops to search for judges. You don't have to go to a judge in your jurisdiction. You can go to Joe Friendly Judge, thereby cutting out any judge that might refuse a warrant because it's not illegal. Or because it's illegal, excuse me. Now we have John Ashcroft saying he's going to wiretap attorney-client conversations in terrorist cases. Terrorist cases I'm only going to do it, I swear, involving cases of terrorists with foreigners. Now, the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution says that we have an absolute right against self-incrimination, and protected communications are those between an attorney and his client, a husband and his wife, a priest or a spiritual leader and his confessor. It's gone. We have President George Walker Bush announcing by fiat, and it evoked a stirring series of editorials by conservative columnist William Safire, that he will now have military tribunals to try terrorists, could be held here in the United States. And in those military tribunals, they don't have to reveal evidence if it's in the interest of national security. They don't have to disclose the voting. They don't have to publicize the trial. And the person convicted can be executed even if 1/3 of the officers disagree. The Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution provides the right to a fair and speedy trial, the right to confront one's accusers and to examine the evidence against him. Also, under the Patriot Act, it is legal for the FBI to come into any business on a terrorist investigation and seize all of the business records. And what's more, there's a clause in there that says that if it's your business, you can't tell anybody that the FBI was there, or they can lock you up. There goes the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, part of the First Amendment. Now, people who read this, who want to defend the Bush administration, will say, good grief, they wrote a sunset clause into this. It's supposed to go away after 4 years. Well, if you read the sunset clause, and it's in my last issue of From the Wilderness, There's a provision in there that says this clause applies except for in any case where the where the investigation was begun before the Sunset Clause takes effect. The Sunset Clause doesn't exist. All they have to say is, we started this investigation before its date in 2005. And there is no Sunset Clause. There is no Santa Claus. Maybe. This is just the beginning. I didn't become a policeman to break laws. I became a policeman to protect people and to enforce laws.
In the article in Inside Magazine, it was mentioned that you didn't get a chance to read the bill completely before you had to vote on it. Is that true?
You know, that is interesting because a lot of people are fascinated with that possibility, and it is true. And they think, well, is this the first time that's happened? And I say, no, anything that's important, that's the usual way they do it. Unfortunately, what they do is they pull these shenanigans and say, you don't have much time. But we look real hard for that bill. And even while I was going to the floor, the staff still could not get it off the internet. So that in itself should have been a reason for everybody to vote against it. So there was not a full disclosure there. We had an idea that they were taking a reasonably bad bill and substituting a very bad bill, which was the Senate version. The House had actually cleaned up the Senate version to some degree, but they switched it at the last minute. We did not have it in front of us, so that even made it that much easier to vote against.
And I am a very poor example. 23 years. I've been shot at twice. I've been made homeless. I've been forced into bankruptcy. I was told that if I ever had children, they'd be killed. I was denied employment. I was arrested on phony charges. I've had all that in 23 years, and yet my sacrifice pales by comparison to some brave men I know. And I'll mention two out of dozens that I know. One is Celerino Castillo, a DEA agent who lives in McAllen, Texas, in poverty, who watched the CIA loading planes full of cocaine at Ilopango Airfield in El Salvador, who confronted Vice President George Bush then, and who was told to leave it alone. It's a White House operation. The DEA forced him out and almost killed him like Serpico. And the other is a Marine colonel by the name of Jim Sabo, who caught those CIA C-130s flying cocaine onto his base at El Toro Marine Air Station and was murdered because of it. People like us, and I'm just one of many, have been trying to tell people like you that unless you face this now and pay the price, this is what the end result is going to be, and it's only going to get worse. Catherine Austin Fitts has a great saying, if we can face it, God can fix it. But it can't happen until we face it. Now let me show you what's on the drawing boards. This is being debated right now. Model State Emergency Health Powers Act as of October 23rd. This goes in conjunction with the 300 million doses of smallpox vaccine that are being ordered. This is an act that will give state and local governments the right to seal off neighborhoods, herd people into stadiums, close down all transportation, water, and communications, seal off everything, suspend the Constitution, seize property, and suspend the writ of habeas corpus. All justified under a supposed threat of massive biological warfare. This is being debated right now. The criminality of this regime is out of the closet. I noticed it was out of the closet in May when Citibank bought Banamex. They don't care anymore. They're arrogant. But I got news for you. These guys, and especially George W. Bush, play in a rigged game. They've always played in a rigged game. And those who play in a rigged game get stupid. Because they don't have to perform. Their arrogance gets them. Now, if you have any lingering doubts, and you can go to my website and read all of these documents. of Operation Northwoods. These are declassified top-secret documents from 1962 showing that the Joint Chiefs of Staff had planned to shoot down 2 American airliners and blame it on Fidel Castro for the purpose of getting a war with Cuba. You don't have to believe me. Go read the declassified documents yourself. They don't care about us. Okay? They're all on the website. The victorious warlord set to open opium floodgates. The Northern Alliance is planning opium poppies hand over fist, and the CIA will control that drug trade and control the money to keep the bubble on Wall Street afloat. I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. I may have scared you, and I love it when people come up to me and say, Mike, what am I supposed to do? And I know that in your head you're saying, you don't want me to tell you what you're supposed to do, because what you want me to tell you is something that'll let you go home, drink a beer, watch your television set, and manage your 401k plan. Okay? Yeah, you can write, and I got to tell you, From the Wilderness, my newsletter has doubled in size since September the 11th. And you know what I'm doing with the money? I'm hiring reporters and I'm writing more stories. One thing you can do... One thing you can do is vote with your money. Stop giving money to people who lie to you. Okay? Now, I'll give you a little word of inspiration. I'll give you, this is a comment on the Patriot Act. It says our forefathers would think it's time for a revolution. This is why they revolted in the first place. They revolted against much milder oppression. And who said it? A Republican Congressman, Ron Paul of Texas.
To vote against the Patriot Act was a very easy vote for me. To me, it was a clear violation of the civil liberties of all Americans. It was called Patriot Act because they didn't want anybody to vote against it, claiming that if you didn't vote for it, you weren't a patriotic American citizen. I think it was probably the opposite way. I think those who voted for it voted for a bill that undermined the Fourth Amendment, the whole principles of individual freedom and liberty in this country. So it was very easy for me to oppose a bill that would just open up Pandora's box with search warrants and the whole ability to wiretap and listen to all our communications, whether they were on the internet, and check on websites, the whole works. It was very easy for me to vote against that bill.
And there are other actions taken by the administration, including military tribunals and Attorney General Ashcroft's announcement that he's going to wiretap attorney-client conversations. How do those make you react?
I guess there are two there. I don't like what he's doing, but the other part is how did we get to this point in our history where our administration, our presidents, and our attorney generals do this by fiat? Just come up and declare, well, there's going to be new military tribunals set up, or we're going to wiretap communications between the accused and their lawyers, and they didn't even confer with the Congress. So I would say that's very bad. Of course, there's the slippery slope there. They say, well, we're only going to do this with the terrorists. Well, how do we know who the terrorists are if they haven't had a trial? So the whole thing is just outlandish for a country that pretends to protect the rights of the accused, and we challenge other countries like Peru in recent years for setting up these type of tribunals. So I think that moving in this direction is a serious challenge to the whole principles of the 10 Amendments and the Constitution.
For all the FBI agents in the audience, a revolution can be anything, but I will tell you this, that a revolution, according to Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Monroe, and all of the founding fathers, is my divine right. One of the most offensive statements I have heard since September the 11th was Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge, when he was sworn in. And he said, civil liberties are one of the most precious gifts that we give our citizens. I got news for you, Governor Ridge. These are inalienable rights. You don't give nothing to me, we give them to you. During the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus, and it led to one of the most powerful and most important trials that ever reached the Supreme Court of the United States. The case was Ex parte Milligan. And this is what they had to say. They said, the Constitution of the United States is a law for rulers and people equally in war and in peace, and covers with the shield of its protection all classes of men at all times and under all circumstances. No doctrine involving more pernicious consequences was ever invented by the wit of man than that any of its provisions can be suspended during any of the great exigencies of government. That was when we had a Supreme Court. Now, I want you to bear in mind, you may think that the system of government is still mildly working here. That, well, we had a law and you know what, so Congress is working, but, you know, Congress is totally subdued. They're rolled over, they're not fighting, so you think it's the court. But bear in mind that the current Supreme Court is the one that illegally gave George W. Bush the election victory. And when I say illegally, I mean it was a butchery in the major media, because the Florida law said the clear intent of the voter. And what happened was the Supreme Court stopped the counting when there were thousands of ballots left uncounted that would have shown the clear intent of the voter, and said, we're going to make a one-case exception here, and we're going to say that we stopped the count, and we're going to just recount the votes that we have and ignore the votes where we could still determine the clear intent of the voter. That was an illegal decision. So where do you go after that?
The first most important thing that the American people should remember is how George Bush came to the White House. 1, through fraud, and 2, through buying the election. The most money ever spent in the history of the United States for this office. That's a crime, and that's a shame.
All right, we are living, get this, in an empire. Bill Sapphire said this about George W. Bush. He said, on what legal meat does this our Caesar feed? Bill Sapphire said that. Okay? And it is an empire. Now, I want to go all the way back, and I want to take you back before I shut up here and leave you with one of my favorite quotes of all time. The foundation of all mental illness is the avoidance of legitimate suffering. And the country is mentally ill. It'll wake up sooner or later. I don't know when. I'm not God. I don't know where this is going. I know that my job is to teach. My job is to give you information. And my job is to clarify for you what's at stake here.
Let's look at the fact that, and this is the most important point, it appears to me that the American people might have a criminal syndicate running their government.
What's at stake here is your liberty. This is a criminal administration. It will not stop. It cannot turn back. President Bush broke the Presidential Records Act of 1978 by refusing to release the Ronald Reagan papers. Arbitrarily broke the law. John Ashcroft broke the law by ordering wiretaps of attorney-client conversations in terrorist cases. The Supreme Court doesn't exist. They're grabbing for the power right now, and you better rest assured, as sure as I'm standing here tonight, that the war that's supposed to be taking place against terrorism is also a war against you. Thank you very much.